Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue with this week's theme, exploring film score music. This time, looking at a film that stars Nicolas Cage, one that I've always wanted to check out, and I believe I've heard good things about, but just never got around to it. The movie is called Mandy. We're going to be looking at Mandy Love Theme, written by Jóhann Jóhannsson. Let's dive into it. See what they have in store for us today. Beautiful crescendo both by volume and layers, with the reverberations filling out the lower parts of these chord stacks. That uplift. We have this descending line, and then at the very end, picks up to a sort of warmth, sort of clarity. I love the little moments where there almost feels like uncertainty. A low end here bringing stability, but also tension, shifting into warmth. It's a lot of subtle harmonic transitions on this track. It's massive. Oh, dude, that sub bass. I love that little detail in there. Notes seem to start before they start. And that's a very cool element of this. It's almost like you can feel a rumble of what's about to happen. When a chord comes in, it kind of has ma, ma. You get this like little faint beginning before the note starts, a feeling of that emotion coming through ever so subtly before you really feel the note become present. Part of this is done through volume. There seems to be almost a lingering vibration of pitch all the time, and it seems that melodies evolve out of this. I don't know if I would call it a drone in particular, because I don't know where it's coming from. But it almost feels like I can hear the notes before they happen. Some part of the track hidden in the foundation of all of this, this note has already started to exist. It's just so quiet. It's tucked into other things. It's disguised. And then the melody appears out of that with more volume, more presence in the mix. But also, I think what's important here is key tones. The notes that I hear that kind of precede the melodies, they're just not very strong harmonically. Usually passing tones, you would rarely start a melody on these on a downbeat. Maybe a half of a beat before as an introduction, da-dum, ba-bum, whatever the melody happens to be, but a way to sort of gracefully move into a melody. You might use a passing tone for that, but you really want strength at the beginning of a phrase. You want to have a strong tone for that too, pitch-wise. All of this creates a very specific idea to me, and it took me a while to get to key into this, but I found the word at the end of the track. It really started to connect with me. Hesitance. This is a song that I mentioned there's uncertainty baked into it. I don't think that's necessarily accurate. That was just the word that I described at the time, the first thing that came to me, but I think hesitation actually aligns it better. It's not a lack of knowing, it's a lack of initiation or initiative. That's the word I want. There's a slight delay between acknowledging something and presenting that thing. And I think that's a really interesting aspect to include in a work. It ties into something else that this song does really well, is time. You may have seen me very subtly trying to suss out some time signatures throughout this track, and I never landed on one. At a certain point, I guess about halfway through this, I just gave up. I came to the conclusion that, at least for the intent for my discussion on this track, the sort of themes and topics that I was already queuing up in my mind, it just wasn't as important. It'd be something nice to know if you're trying to transcribe this or trying to play it. Yeah, knowing the time signature and the tempo, really good for that. But in the case of dissecting it and analyzing it, trying to figure out what it's trying to say, I don't really think it's too important, at least not to define it. It's actually the lack of definition that stands out to me. There is a core pulse throughout this. When there is a melody, each note seems to be equal distance. There is a temporal pulse to this track. But when the notes aren't present, I have found that when notes came in, we'd have a gap of space, and then a melody would come in, and then a gap. Now, if I try to keep the same time through those gaps, it never quite lined up. Part of this may be me. I'm usually have a pretty good internal metronome, but it's possible I might be just having an off day and slightly behind the beat while I'm counting through these, but it just never seemed to line up. It could also be that we're in an odd time signature and a lack of a core beat, lack of a pulse, a lack of percussive instruments at all, it just made it a little more difficult to figure out what kind of odd numbered time signature we're in. Regardless, it creates a sort of a disconnect. I've already kind of found this hesitancy in the delivery of these notes. I'm finding a hesitancy to actually even get to them. Time seems to pause and linger all throughout this track. Sometimes when I think, well, we should be starting the next phrase by now, we aren't. I have to wait for the song to engage with me. This kind of leans into that hesitation, but I think this is also where I got some of the uncertainty from as well. The song is never really sure if it wants to or is ready to proceed. Keep all of this in mind. This idea is going to come back in a little bit. One other thing that I really love about this, though, is harmonic uncertainty as well. This song tends to create a vague chord and then build from there. The beginnings of most phrases feel emotionally, I suppose there's two ways to look at it, emotionally empty or emotionally blank. I think either way paints a picture of something that has potential, something that can evolve into either direction or any direction. And it's really up to the listener, or maybe it's explored more in the rest of the text, the film, the scene that's happening here, about which one of those is true. But to me, I do get this feeling of incompletion evolving into something more full, more fulfilled, more accurate, maybe even. It's very interesting to hear these chords that just lack character. They don't say anything. It is sound. It is a stack of notes, but it's just not emotionally engaged with anything. It's kind of bland. It's a blank canvas. And always from this point, we will explore a chord progression that takes most of those notes and redefines other ones, adds to it. It's swapping out some that were creating less clarity and adding in notes that are going to imply very clearly emotion. And through this evolution of chord, removing some notes, adding other notes, replacing notes, and shifting from all these different chordal ideas, we end up with something incredibly nuanced. There's a lot of emotion going on in each of these individual chords that together speak of something larger. And it's only embellished by the fact that we start off with this blank slate almost every time, occasionally even landing back on it, as if the journey of emotions we're exploring leads us back to where we were. A blank or an unknowing. Something less defined. There is reverence in here at times. There are certainly warm, fuzzy feels, comfort. There is an adoration, even. I think it comes from the title. It is a love theme after all. But it's more of a caring kind of love than a romantic love. And I think that's why a lot of this track tends to move towards warm comforts rather than Valentine's Day, lovey-dovey, head over heels kind of sounds. Warmth and comforts. Certainly something that you would want to give to someone if you love them, if you care about them. A safety. And I think a lot of this song revolves around that, little pieces of tension weaving in at times. There's eeriness, which makes the comfort even stronger. And that really has me questioning the blank slate chords. Starting there, We have character growth, someone who may be apathetic or doesn't have strong feelings about someone, but develops this care for them. But to also end progressions with that is interesting, calling into question maybe the validity of their emotion, of their feelings towards this person. It's interesting, especially since I can never anticipate or dictate where the track is going. Sometimes chords end with very beautiful resonant finales, sometimes progressions end unceremoniously. They're just there, they just wrap up for a little bit, and then we have the gaps of space between. Once again, bringing in the hesitance, bringing in the uncertainty. I think the last piece of the puzzle for all of this is the production of it. These handful of instruments, they are drenched in reverb. It makes this really interesting contrast where it does kind of feel like it takes forever to get into a note. I talked about that hesitancy to actually start a phrase, but once it started, it ripples outward. The note is played, the musician continues on to the next note, the next note, the next note, and then stops playing. May have only played 5 notes, and yet they continue to drift outward, building out the atmosphere of this. Their effects, the effects of their actions are felt long after the action has been taken. Not only do we have this feeling of these massive chord stacks that at the beginning feel a little bland or maybe uncertain, but by the end are its massive wall of comfort. No, I don't know why I said not only. That's like the core element I want to focus on here. The production allows little ideas to become larger than the sum of their parts. And it ends up creating something that feels very comforting to be within while it's still present. It does taper off eventually. But much like the slow coming in, it's also a slow going out. And it allows so much of this song to be dictated by so little. I think that's a really interesting component to it. I'd be curious to know how many notes are played in this 4.5-minute track. Honestly, I'd say it's a small amount, and despite that, it still fills this space in so many moments. What I get at the end of this is that while there may be an uncertainty, some shaky ground in the depiction of this character and their relationship to another, there is a strong core tenet to them. Something that exists within their core that even if they don't know who they are, even if they don't know what this other person means to them, they have this pure component to themselves. They care about them even if they don't care. They know they care about this other person. And every little thing they do ripples out and is a chain reaction of creating comfort and safety in a world that can be tense, can be anxious, can be eerie. That's what I get out of this track. I think Jóhann Jóhannsson did a fantastic job. This is very cool coming at this not too long after checking out Still Life by Kane Parsons, I believe. Might be misremembering that last name. Parsons. There we go. Kane Parsons. Because that was another, I believe, duet of minimal composition with a hyper focus on production and creating a lot of emotionality and honestly narrative storytelling through music, through the production primarily. This is a very different way to take it, and honestly an incredibly different song that tells me a totally different story, but I see so many parallels between the two of these. These are going to wrap up my thoughts though. What did you think of Jóhann Jóhannsson's Mandy Love Theme. Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this track? Let me know. Put all of that, as well as anything else you'd like to add, into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.